Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Greg Gilligan. I am the Vice President of Operations for RVA757 Connects. Thank you for joining us and tuning into this latest RVA757 Connects Virtual Innovation Spotlight webinar. We have a very compelling webinar today as we explore one of the most urgent and overlooked challenges in aviation, that's the managing of low altitude airspace amid the rapid expansion of drone technology. We will learn how Virginia Beach-based DroneUp is tackling this issue. But let me just before we get into the program, just a couple of housekeeping matters. First, I'll introduce our sponsor for this month's webinar. Then I'll give a quick update on what's happening with RVA757 Connects. Then we will delve into today's topic, and then we'll leave some room at the end for some questions and answers. Just as a reminder, we do record all of our webinars, and this recording will be available later today on our website. And if you have any questions, please put them into the chat function, and I will look at them towards the end of the program, and that's when we'll do the Q&A. RVA757 Connects is a nonprofit organization, so we rely on donations. Here are our corporate investors, and we thank them for their support. One of our corporate investors is the PRA Group, which is a global leader in acquiring and collecting non-performing loans and returns capital to banks and other creditors to help them expand financial services for consumers in the Americas, Europe, and Australia. Here today to tell us more about the PRA Group is Giovanna Gennard. She's the company's Vice President of Global Communications and External Affairs and Marketing Leader. Giovanna joined the PRA Group in summer of 2022. Before that, she was at Old Dominion University for up to a decade, and with her most recent role there as the Assistant Vice President for Strategic Communications and the Chief Marketing Officer. Giovanna also serves on the RVA 757 Connects board, as well as on the executive committee. So Giovanna, I'm going to turn it over to you and tell us more about the PRA Group.
Thank you, Greg, and good afternoon, everyone. Founded and headquartered in Norfolk, Virginia since 1996, PRA Group is a global leader in acquiring and collecting non-performing loans. By purchasing debt portfolios in large volumes, we play a critical role in the world economy in that we return capital to banks and other creditors to help expand financial services to consumers. With operations in 18 countries in the Americas, Europe, and Australia, and 3,000 employees worldwide, PRA Group companies are committed to working with customers on their journey to financial well-being in a fair and ethical way. At our NASDAQ-listed publicly traded company, we meet high levels of compliance and reliability and create rewarding careers for employees. We make it a priority to give back and make a positive impact in the communities in which we live and work, and that is one of the reasons why we support the mission of RVA757 Connects and are sponsoring today's virtual innovation spotlight on DroneUp. To learn more about PRA Group, I invite you to visit our website at www.pragroup.com. Thank you, Greg.
Giovanna, thank you so much, and thank you for your service on our board and on our executive committee, as well as the chair of our communications committee. So thank you very much for all your support and your help, and also to the PRA Group.
Thanks for having me.
That's great. Let me tell you a little bit about RVA757 Connects. We are a nonprofit organization, as I mentioned, whose mission is to improve the economic success and quality of life for everyone living in the Richmond region, which we call RVA, and the Hampton Roads region, which we call 757. We are a coalition of top leaders representing businesses, higher education, and organizations. We are following a national model where nearby localities collaborate on initiatives that advance both regions. We are advancing the mega region from the Richmond area to Hampton Roads as the I-64 Innovation Corridor. As you can see, we are pursuing several different priorities. We are helping the I-64 Innovation Corridor become a global internet hub, and I'll talk about that in just a moment here. We also advanced the I-65 widening project. That was that 29 miles gap from New Kent County to Williamsburg. This project is now fully funded and construction has started. The project will be finished by 2028 with 3 lanes in each direction from Richmond all the way to Hampton Roads. We also are advocating for the multi-use trails such as Trail 757 and Hampton Roads and the Fall Line Trail here in the Richmond region. As you can read more about our initiatives and our priorities on our website at RVA757Connects.com. Our top priority is to spearhead efforts to have the I-64 Innovation Corridor designated as a global internet hub. Our plan is a bold and innovative approach to harness a once in a lifetime, or once in a generation, I should say, opportunity to transform the future of the Richmond region and Hampton Roads. When you view the Richmond area and Hampton Roads together, combined, we have the core digital infrastructure in place needed to become a global internet hub. This 3-foot by 2-foot map explains visually how the I-64 Innovation Corridor becomes a global internet hub. Our mega region has the subsea cables that come ashore in Virginia Beach, and more are coming. We have a robust local and intercity terrestrial networks. We have digital network rings. We have internet exchanges, and we have data centers of all types and sizes, and more are on the way. If you'd like to get an actual copy of this map and this map brochure, please let me know and email me, and we'll send you one. On the other side of the map brochure explains what a global internet hub is, why it's important, and the strategies we are using to build one of the interconnected digital hubs. You can also go to our homepage of our website, RVA757 Connects, or the homepage of globalinternethub.com website and click on the map to get a better idea of our digital assets. As part of our Global Internet Hub initiative, RVA757 Connects is championing for strong and expanding digital infrastructure ecosystems to enable world-class communications and connectivity. Having modern digital infrastructure ecosystems fuel everything from cloud computing to e-commerce to AI-driven manufacturing. A powerful digital infrastructure also supports the growth of high-paying IT tech jobs and ensures the industries of tomorrow will locate and expand in the Hampton Roads region and the Richmond region. All this will help grow our overall GDP, our workforce, our productivity per worker, our wages, and in turn, economic prosperity for everyone. To better explain the importance of the digital infrastructure ecosystem and its connection to data centers, we also developed a comprehensive Q&A section on our website. Please take a look at them. We also gave the Global Internet Hub initiative a soul by recruiting a national nonprofit organization called PCs for People, which is the largest and most successful computer refurbisher operating in large U.S. markets with a vision to end the digital divide. PCs for People collects outdated computers at no cost to the donating businesses and organizations, refurbishes these old computers, and installs the latest software, and then provides renewed desktop systems to underserved residents and families for free, and late model laptops for up to $150. In addition, PCs for People provides free toll-free tech support and free ongoing computer training. PCs for People should be operational sometime next month in June. The nonprofit bought this former Save-A-Lot store building on East Pembroke Avenue in Hampton, which is next to the Dollar General store there. That building will serve as its refurbishment, distribution center, and retail outlet. Now let's turn to today's topic. This afternoon, we will dive into one of the most urgent and overlooked issues facing aviation these days. It's how are we managing the low altitude airspace as drones scale faster than our ability to coordinate them. It's not a future problem, it's happening now. Over 1 million drones now operate in the United States, outnumbering the number of crewed aircraft 4 to 1. And most fly without real-time oversight, or deconfliction. An Associated Press analysis recently of the Aviation Safety Database revealed that drones last year accounted for nearly 2/3 of reported mid-air collisions involving commercial passenger planes taking off and landing at the country's 30 busiest airports. That was the highest percentage of such near misses since 2020. But the U.S. still doesn't have a national system to control and coordinate drone operations. Let me introduce to you our speaker today. Tom Walker is the founder and CEO of DroneUp. That's the Virginia Beach-based tech company tackling Americans' growing airspace crisis. Tom is a former special operations officer and recognized leader in autonomy and aviation innovation. He also serves on the RVA757 Connects board. Tom built DroneUp into the largest drone services network in the United States with over 55,000 independent operators, then launched the nation's largest drone delivery network, reaching over 4 million customers in just 9 months. 3 years ago this month, sort of kind of like a deja vu, Tom, you were featured during our virtual innovation spotlight webinar when you talked at the time about how DroneUp was using its drone delivery technology services from Walmart stores with plans to expand that DroneUp delivery network across the country. However, DroneUp has since shifted its focus, moving beyond its original business model to tackle one of the most pressing challenges in aviation. That's the safety of managing low altitude airspace as autonomous drones become more widespread. Tom will talk about that strategic pivot in his presentation. So before I turn over the program to Tom, let me just remind everybody, if you have any questions, please use the chat function. So I'll be able to have those questions ready for Tom. And now I'm going to turn the program over to Tom.
Yeah, thank you, Greg. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right, great. Well, I appreciate the opportunity to be here. This is my second time, and if we're in tradition of SNL 3 more times, I get a jacket. So I'm looking forward to that. As Greg said, I am Tom Walker. I'm the founder and CEO of DroneUp. And before we get into the meat of this, I want to tell you just a little bit. Greg covered it a little bit, but I want to back up and talk a little bit about DroneUp and why we have a very unique perspective on this problem. So as most of you know, or many of you know, we started about 8 years ago, and we were focused on drone services. Well, I want to say this because especially those who are on the call who are investors or partners will tell you we are a technology company first, but we had to fund that technology. And so we became a drone services provider, and within a very short period of time became the largest drone service provider in the United States, maybe in the world, with, like Greg said, over 55,000 operators. And we flew millions of miles of missions doing surveillance, inspection, and so forth. But we realized that drone services were going to be a commodity, and we wanted to continue to develop our technology. And we had the opportunity to partner with Walmart to develop a delivery network. And in 9 months, in the absence of real regulatory support or a supply chain, we built the largest drone delivery network in the United States, able to deliver to approximately 4 million customers. And along the way, got Part 135 certified, so we became an official air carrier and an airline. And I think that was really a demonstration of our understanding of both how to operate in the airspace, how to work with the regulators, and also how to influence policy. But the reason I mention all of that is because it gave us a very different perspective on the integration of unmanned systems into the national airspace. And most companies that create technologies like us, they're creating it to solve a problem that they perceive, whereas we, as the largest operator, really had the chance to see what the real challenges were. And over the past few years, as many of you who have tracked unmanned systems and drones, you've heard, the key to unlocking this industry is a supply chain, and it is BVLOS, beyond visual line of sight. And we looked at the world a little differently. What we saw was that the true path to safely integrating and scaling was being able to have different types of operators, flying different types of drones, conducting different types of missions in contested and congested airspace, and to do it in a way that protected people on the ground, it protected drones from colliding with drones, And more importantly, it protected general aviation from drones so that we could coexist in the national airspace. And so that's really the technology and the policy that we've been focusing on for the past several years. Now, I want to pause there and I want to talk about everyone who reads the news has heard about the air traffic control modernization plan. But let's talk about that for a minute, because our air traffic control system is woefully and painfully out of date. And when we say that, what I mean is we're still using analog and voice communications, fiber optics, which have been the standard for high capacity transmission and networking since the early 2000s, still not implemented as the core backbone. The RATC system is still running on copper. Add to that that the next gen, this modernization program, which started in 2007, is now 2 decades later, and it's only partially and disparately deployed. And the radar systems that we're using are early 1980s technology. It finally took a series of catastrophic and fatal accidents to move that ATC modernization to the top of the priority list. We see a growing problem in the airspace with unmanned systems. And now, not only do we see it, but you're starting to see it in the media. And I'm going to show you the numbers that prove it. And what we're doing, both on Capitol Hill and everywhere else that we can, is we're voicing those concerns. But we're not just voicing those concerns, we're proposing a solution. And what we're trying to do is say, before we have to have that catastrophic fatal incident, how can we solve the problem today? Next slide, please. Pretty please. So as Greg said earlier, right now we have about 1 million plus drones flying in the United States. That's just the registered drones that the FAA knows about. That number is going to double by 2027. It's going to double again by 2030. But everyone likes to say there's 1 million drones to 250,000 manned aircraft, and that the number of drones is going to continue to go up. And so that ratio is going to get bigger. But let's don't forget, over the next 3 to 5 years, a number of those manned aircraft that are flying as we move into more advanced air mobility will also become unmanned. So the actual number of unmanned is going to decrease while the number of manned is going to double and then double again. So we're already 4 to 1. It's going to get continually worse. And as of right now, as of this moment, there is no low altitude or unmanned air traffic control system. And in fact, you're going to find out as we move through this presentation, there is no system to prevent or protect general aviation and commercial aviation from a drone intrusion. Next slide, please. So let's talk about some numbers and what I've been talking about and kind of summarize it. No real-time deconfliction, no cross-agency visibility, and no low-altitude air traffic control. We're already seeing the impacts of this. We've seen firefighting aircraft in California grounded. We've seen airspace and air flight and commercial airlines and flights grounded because of potential threats from drones in the airspace. We've had an increase in foreign UAVs, which are monitoring critical infrastructure for which we don't have an effective counter UAS capability for. And the number of near misses with commercial aviation has increased significantly, and I'll show you those numbers in a minute. Why is all this a problem? Well, in addition to just being a threat to commercial aircraft and to general aviation, it also creates a serious national security concern. It slows emergency response, not just to wildfires in California, but to basic emergency response that our local firefighters and our local police departments, our Secret Service, that are using in order to protect our country and our people. But more importantly, but equally important is it is significantly impacting our ability in the U.S. to scale the UAS business opportunities and capitalize on growth opportunities, both from a manufacturing and a technology standpoint. Next slide. So let's put it into perspective. So DJI recently, for whatever reason that we don't understand, rolled back their geofencing technology. That is the technology that essentially prevented drones from flying into restricted airspace like the White House and other areas. They just randomly took that off, allowing those drones to now be able to be flown by any operator into those restricted airspaces. But the big numbers that should really hopefully have an impact on you is that we've had 1.2 million, and this is just reported, drone violations where drones have entered restricted airspace or they've incurred into a military airspace. And on top of that, we've had over 270,000 altitude violations reported. Now, this is important because one of the things the FAA does, and this is what they have the authority to do. So this isn't being negative to them, but the policy for drones is that they cannot fly above 400 feet. There's a reason for the 400 feet. There's several reasons, but a significant reason is that separation between the unmanned drones that are flying in the airspace and the general aviation and commercial airspace. The problem is we don't have any way to stop it. We don't have any way to control it. So we know that nearly 300,000 times that we know of, drones have flown above that and entered that commercial aviation space. The numbers just get a little more concerning from here. We've had nearly a 50% year-over-year increase in pilots. This is manned aircraft pilots reporting drones in the air around them. We've had 24 telemetry confirmed. Now, what this means is not somebody said I almost hit one, because one of the, and I'll point this out, this is very important. One of the conversations that happens is, well, the pilot said he saw a bird or drone, but maybe it was a bird, or they hit what they think was a drone, but maybe it was a bird. So I focused on things in these particular statistics that are verified or validated through sensor sources. Except for the reported, and I call that reported, but this is telemetry confirmed near mid-air collisions, just near DFW. But Embry-Riddle came out and said there was at least another 24 that were unreported near misses at the same airport over a 3-year period. Now, I'm going to tell you this, that out of that 24 that were confirmed, 6 of them were within 50 feet. And the other thing that's not in this sheet right here, and I don't think it's further in the deck that I want to tell you, that is in the last 12 months, well, actually fewer than that from September, there have aircraft that were on final approach to airports, 6 had to deviate in order to avoid colliding with a drone. I say this because the numbers are staggering and they are concerning, and it is at a point where we are at the same point right now with unmanned systems and the concerning data points that we're seeing that we were with crewed aviation 10 years ago. And rather than taking that information and taking that statistical data and forcing the upgrade to our air traffic control system, we waited and we watched the data exacerbate until the inevitable happened. What we're trying to do is not scare people with this data and not frighten them away from flying, but rather to point out that we have the data. We know that in the absence of taking corrective action, and I'm going to talk about what that action is, because it's like everybody says, don't bring a problem without a solution. I think we have a solution, but the point is, this is real data. It's a real concern, and we need to take action on it now before the inevitable happens. And the last piece of data here is very important, is that drones accounted for over half of the reported near misses across the country, and that's according to AP's analysis of the FAA's own safety data. Next. And it's already happened. So if you follow the news recently, a firefighting aircraft in California was collided with a small drone. That's the wing tip of that drone where it hit it. And it ended up grounding one of the key firefighting assets for 5 days. Not only that, what isn't in here is that they ended up limiting the number of firefighting aircraft that were in the air out of similar concerns. So this goes back to an earlier point that this lack of a framework, this lack of a control system in order to be able to protect these aircraft in the air is only going to get worse, and it is a concern, and it is happening. This drone was actually flown from about 1.5 miles away from a roof where there was no way for the operator to know what was around them. And again, yes, there's a policy in place that says it shouldn't happen, but unfortunately, there's no system in place to actually confirm that it didn't. Next slide. Here's the good news. And I know you're probably laughing that, well, okay, there's good news, but there is good news. And that good news is yes, we've been shouting this from the mountaintops, but now it's actually getting attention. We talk about the Associated Press article, Fox News ran one. These are all just in the last few days, as you can see. And even the Sun has got an article. I'm aware of 3 more that are coming out because we were contacted about discussing this topic with them. And so we're hoping that the media's attention, and then whatever you're going to be able to do to help us, which I'll talk about at the end, is we need to make sure that as we are going through this air traffic control modernization program, that we are making the noise, leveraging the media, leveraging these stories to ensure that low altitude air traffic control is included in any air traffic control modernization plan. This is a once in a lifetime opportunity. They're focusing on the airspace. They're focusing on increasing the safety. And so what we're doing is we're working with Congress. We're working with the federal agencies and everyone that basically in Capitol Hill and around Capitol Hill to make sure that we're including a modernization piece that will help offset the risk that we're talking about right now. Next slide. So the question a lot of people ask me is, so how did we get here? I mean, how did this happen? How did we get so many drones in the airspace without any system to protect general aviation from these particular platforms? And I'm going to go back to it shouldn't be that hard of a question to answer when you consider that we, in fact, have not, even with next gen starting in 2007, been able to achieve an air traffic control system that is current with today's modern reality needs. So in parallel with the challenges of trying to upgrade the air traffic control system, suddenly these unmanned systems were being integrated into the airspace. And I think the regulators and policymakers were really having a challenge trying to understand what role they were going to play. How are we going to appropriately regulate them? And so there has been no national system. There's been plenty of discussion about systems. There's plenty of standards, not just domestically, but internationally. But the reality is we haven't even approached the discussion table about how to handle this. In addition to that, all of the agencies, all of the commercial operators, whether it's contractors or whether it's independent small businesses, are all operating in silos. They're all using vertically integrated, closed proprietary technology that doesn't really communicate with anybody. It doesn't really tell them where they are. Now, there are some things in place, and those of you who are knowledgeable say, what about remote ID and what about some of the UTM initiatives? And I will say that those are good steps in the right direction, but the problem is UTM may tell me where you are, but it doesn't deconflict me. It doesn't create lateral separation between me and general aviation. And it doesn't provide the capability to clear the airspace in the event that I have an immediate need, whether that's an evac, a medevac, or a plane, or a commercial aircraft that's in distress. So while all of those things are meaningful in their own way, they don't actually do anything to protect us as we're flying in that aircraft on approach or leaving an airport. And legacy ATC system, as we talked about, was so out of date, it doesn't even take into consideration autonomous traffic. And again, one of the things that we're going to talk about is there is not an airspace use unified strategy around how we share airspace in the national airspace between manned and unmanned traffic. Go ahead. So if we talk about what about all the policies and going back to the previous 3 FAA reauthorization bills that really laid out specific guidelines for safe integration of drones into the airspace, you have to understand that all of the FAA certification, everything that we have now from our risk models to our frameworks are based on kind of single operator, single mission paradigms. that assume that the operator is going to be in somewhat of a low density operating area, maintaining control of their drones in an airspace that is restricted below manned airspace. So therefore, this kind of separation shouldn't necessarily be a challenge. And we've yet to come up with a program to certify large multi-drone, multi-platform, multi-mission operations in a shared airspace. That doesn't exist. And then again, most of the programs, even when we went through our Part 135, a huge chunk of that was the 44807 process on getting the drone hardware and software certified. And then once you got all that done, then yes, you had to go through and put your operations and training manuals and so forth together. But still, I would argue the focus is more on the hardware side of the drones rather than the operational airspace management component of how we're going to continue to manage and mitigate risks. Next. So this is where we get into the solution. And this is why I think today, right this moment, is a perfect place and time where we have the opportunity to fix this problem before it becomes catastrophic. I would call it a crisis today, but I think it's a crisis that we can easily take care of, especially knowing that right now we have an administration that is focused on improving the safety of the airspace. So what do we need? Next slide. We talk about a framework, but there's really two things we need. The first thing we need is policy. We need to understand we need to define how unmanned systems are going to integrate. And, I was told recently in a meeting that I was in DC, I said the word mixed use airspace. And I've heard the word apoplectic before. I've heard it used. I thought I knew what it meant until I said mixed use airspace. And then I realized what that word actually meant when the person across the table was apoplectic. And essentially what I was told is don't use that word. We don't want to talk about mixed use airspace of manned and unmanned. But the reality is we must, because the number of unmanned systems is going to continue to go up. The truth of the matter is, I would argue as an unmanned professional that if we integrate 4-dimensional AI-driven deconfliction with autonomous systems, it's safer. But whether or not they agree or disagree, we know that it's going to increase. We know that advanced air mobility is a key driver. You go to any of the regional economic development groups, and they will talk about unmanned. They will talk about advanced air mobility. This is not an option. It's going to happen. So we have to develop a framework. We call the one that we've proposed the USIF, but a framework that defines how these are going to coexist in the airspace. And then we need a technology platform that actually allows that framework to work. Remember, today's air traffic control system has no ability. It is analog and voice comms. It is meant to get aircraft into the airspace and onto the runway and off of the runway and out of the airspace. That's its primary job. And then manage air traffic above a certain altitude. Not only do they not have the capabilities to manage unmanned systems, they don't even have the ability using the current radar systems to see below 500 feet. So even if they could theoretically figure out how to manage it, they couldn't see it, and therefore they couldn't effectively deconflict it. But more importantly, our current air traffic control staffing levels and systems are struggling to support the 250,000 manned aircraft we have. Try to turn that into 1 million or 2 million or 4 million, regardless of the air traffic control modernization strategy. So it's going to require a secondary technology platform. Next. So what we are proposing at the federal level is what we call the Unmanned Systems Integration Framework. The purpose of this is to put all of the different agencies that are operating drones, all of the commercial operators, under a collective collaboration platform where maybe they don't see what each other is actually doing, but they're all participating in that. And it's similar to many of the UTM initiatives that you've heard discussed. But what we want to do is we want to be able to define certain things like types of separation, use of AI. How do we integrate four-dimensional separation and pathing in here in a way that allows priority operations of certain unmanned systems, deprioritizing certain commercial operations? And as you can imagine, that creates a lot of consternation and pushback from certain commercial entities, and those entities who feel like their flights and operations are going to automatically be secondary to the key priorities of DHS, Secret Service, first responders. But we believe that there's a balance, and that's the key thing that we're trying to drive in this is balance and safety. But it also allows for us to control that airspace today, but for the next 20 and 30 years as we move into advanced air mobility, because the important thing to know is right now it's considered 400 feet and below is unmanned systems, 500 feet above is manned aviation. But the truth of the matter is that's not going to be that way. It's not going to be that way forever, because eventually, as we move into more advanced air mobility, we're going to go well above the 500 feet and well into that area where we are commingling with manned and unmanned systems. So how do we define that? And if anyone wants to see the outline of our unmanned systems integration framework, we have a deck. We'd gladly share it with you. So just email me. I'm not going to go into the details of it today. Go ahead. But again, as I said a few minutes ago, it's not just about this framework that defines how we operate and what are the key safety metrics, what are the different things that define the ability to coexist within that mixed use airspace, but what is the technology that actually drives it? And I want to pause here on this particular slide and go back to what I said at the very beginning about where we were. As we began to expand operations, we had one particular delivery operation that literally our launch point was off of the end of a runway of an operating commercial airport. And as we had the opportunity to operate not just in that type of congested airspace, but at one point we had over 300 waivers to allow us to fly in different types of restricted or congested or contested airspace. We began about 5 years ago building a system that did all of the things that I said earlier. How do we have all of our operators, whether it's delivery operators, whether it's inspection operators, whether it's our first responders, whether it's our federal support division, how do we have all of them operating in the same airspace, flying different types of aircraft, conducting different types of missions, protecting the people on the ground, deconflicting the drones in the air, and safely separating from manned airspace? Those were the key objectives of the USIF, but that's the platform we began building 5 years ago because we needed it, because we were concerned about our ability to operate safely in the airspace. And how do we safely deconflict with those other drone operators around us? Next slide. And that's why we built the technology that many of us know is Uncrew. And it has all of those key components. And again, this isn't a sales webinar for Uncrew, but the point is bringing this up is we know that we have this technology. We assume that there are others who have similar technology. So we're not claiming we're the only ones. I'm just telling you why we have it. And it takes all of those things that we talked about, four-dimensional AI-driven pathing, which is so many light years ahead, if you will, of what our current air traffic control system is. And it allows for all of the things that we talked about: use of congested and contested airspace, deconfliction with very, very little human interaction, and multi-mission, multi-platform, multi-user support. We built this technology. We know the technology works because it's the technology that's been powering our fleets and operating, and we've been able to achieve certification through the FAA. So we're confident that we have a technology that helps solve this problem. We're certain that there are probably others out there that do. We haven't seen it, but we're not assuming we're the only ones that have it. And the other thing I want to point out, if I hadn't already said it, and I got a knock, I actually changed the table that I'm using to make sure I had wood to hit before I said this, is that We are the only operator of our size and scale that has a perfect track record over the last 8 years with the FAA. We have a perfect safety record. So I say that because as we come to the table with the DOT, with the FAA, with Congress, and with the White House, and with everyone that we're talking to, we come at it with a little bit different perspective than just a technology company that says we have a solution. We come to it as a company who has had the largest drone services operation, who has built the largest drone delivery operation, who has gone through FAA certification as an airline, and oh, by the way, and has a perfect safety record with the FAA. So we believe that leveraging all of those different components that we're very fortunate to have, in our portfolio, gives us the credibility to help push and influence the decisions that need to be made about protecting the airspace today, especially as we do this air traffic control modernization. Next. So I always get asked when people hear me, and at the end, generally, most people agree that we've got a problem. Not everyone agrees of who the responsibility to fix the problem is or who's responsible for the problem itself. And I'm certain that there are probably people on the call that don't agree with everything that I said. But here's the thing that I will say is whether you agree with everything or only agree with a portion of it, you have to agree that something needs to be done. We need a policy, and we need a platform to help solve this problem. How do we get there? Well, what we need right now is we need leadership. We need leadership from the White House. We feel like we're getting that. We need leadership from Congress. All we have to do is get everybody at Congress to agree to one thing, and how hard can that be? I'm just kidding on that. As anyone knows, right now the problem that we're oftentimes dealing with is well, how does this particular congressperson feel about this? And we'll give an opinion, and then we're going to get a different opinion from the person that we're talking to, right? So, but we're seeing a shift in that, and we're seeing where everyone is starting to come together and agree that this fundamentally is a problem that we do need to agree on, that we do need to fix. But we need to continue to push leadership in Congress. We need to push leadership from the White House. And what we need more of is we need more local communities, business leaders, and community leaders who are hearing this in the news and hearing it from us, to be talking to their legislators, talking to their policymakers, and saying, this is something we're concerned about. What are you doing about it? And trust me, at the very same time you're doing that, we're crawling the halls of Congress talking to them about the very same thing. Next. So that's it. Everybody's talking about we need better drones. We need more drones. We're not ready to trust AI. I would say that all of those things are valid, and all of those things are things that we should be focused on. We certainly should be building better drones. We certainly can continue to improve AI. But really, right now, we need leadership to push these things while we have the moment in time to do it. And I think that's it. And with that, I will take any questions that you may have, Greg.
Great. Gosh, Tom, that's a lot to unpack. That was fascinating as all get out. Tricia, if you can let me take control of the screen, that'd be great. And I remind everyone, if you have any questions, to please use the chat function, and so we can ask Tom some questions. But Tom, you at the very end there, you were talking about. I guess my big question is, what's the holdup? If the airspace risk is such a big deal, why hasn't it been solved already? Is it leadership? Is there somebody? What's the holdup? Can you?
I think it's been a couple of things. I think by and large, and I will even take somewhat of responsibility for this as an industry leader, is that, but I like to joke, and I think Tricia hates when I say this, but I like to joke that my bipolar disorder pitches in and helps me a little bit here. Those of us who have really been trying to grow the industry have been promoting the safety of drones. We've been promoting the safety record of drones, and we've been standing on that. And so there is a big push by many of the advocacy organizations and lobbying organizations to really promote enabling the growth of the drone industry, rather than how do we actually build an industry that is safe for each other and safe, in an homogeneous airspace where we're all living together. Number is one issue. Number two is companies that have been building their own vertically integrated proprietary stacks. There's nothing wrong with that, but they haven't built their stacks in a way that they coexist with others in the industry. There's really been no motivation for that. But the third thing, and I think the most disturbing one, is I actually had a congressman tell me last week when we were in DC. He said, Tom, he said, you saw what it took for us to take on ATC modernization. He said it probably is going to take something similar to move this forward. I pushed back. We had a very heated conversation, heated enough that he invited me back in 2 weeks to do it again. And I'll also be testifying before Congress, I think next month, on this topic. So I think that it's going to take media, it's going to take us continuing to make a lot of noise. But Greg, the other specific thing that really gives me a lot of encouragement right this second is we are going to invest somewhere between 13.5 and $30 billion into this air traffic control modernization program. We only need a fraction of that to really do something in the low altitude area and prove the efficacy of four-dimensional AI-driven deconfliction. So I think there's a lot of reasons why it hadn't happened, but I think there's some good positive signs of why it may be about to happen.
So Tom, let me ask you, aren't there already some systems in place to prevent drones from colliding with planes? I mean, what's missing?
There are no systems. It's just policy.
Gotcha. Okay. And with all the innovations that we've seen with drones over the last decade plus, why is I guess the US, I don't know if this is happening elsewhere in the world, but why is the US still behind on managing them so safely? Is it because of the pushback that you talked about?
Um, y- I think it's been a little bit of um, well, there's been several things. I mean, one is the investors and the people who want to put money into unmanned systems technology have really been looking for what are those unlocks? What are those things that are going to allow the industry to scale? That goes back to something I said earlier, where a lot of people in the industry said it's beyond visual line of sight. The moment we can fly BVLOS, then the industry will explode. And then were those that said it's a supply chain issue. We don't have U.S. manufacturing. We're not funding U.S. manufacturing, and all the other things around that. But the problem was there also wasn't a supply chain demand for that either. So, that argument doesn't hold a lot of water. I believe, and I'll go back to what I said, is we haven't taken on the policy for how
Mhm.
we're going to integrate unmanned systems into that. The FAA's done a good job of creating kind of policies that allow us to operate, but it's really been how do we treat you here, and how do we keep you guys apart? And then secondarily, there's not really been a significant investment into testing the kind of technologies that we're trying to bring to the table, because I don't think the concern for safety has been where it is today.
So Tom, we have a question from one of our people on the webinar today. Wants to know how would we get involved with this, either with your company or within the industry if we wanted to? How can people get involved?
The biggest issue right now is the more people from our state legislators, all the way up to our representatives, our congressmen, our congress people, people, and our senators, and all the way up to the White House. They need to hear this concern. They need to be responding to the stories that are in the media, not just what Tom is saying, but what the AP, what Fox, and what everybody, and there's more that are coming. And we need to be pushing back on our representatives and saying, what are you doing today? I get it, you're upgrading air traffic control in order to try to prevent the unfortunate incidents like the Black Hawk and the CRJ that just collided. I mean, that particular one was another great example of an outdated ATC system because they're using voice comms that got stepped on. Again, we're back in 80s technology, so we need to be complaining about it.
Tom O'Grady wants to know how can the leadership at Norfolk International or Richmond International help establish those two airports in our mega region as a national example for drone safety? Have you
It's a
talked to
great
them?
question, and so it's a great question, and we would love to have that conversation because what we're doing right now is we're talking to the FAA. We're also talking and into DOT, and we're talking to airports about how can we begin to demonstrate both a localized framework and the technology in and around airports. In fact, we're doing a demonstration to Congress in a couple of weeks where we're going to be demonstrating, and we're actually using the Norfolk Airport as our example airport. And we did it without permission. So I don't know if we're going to get copyright violations on it, but we're actually using the Norfolk Airport as our airport and demonstrating how it could taking the exact real data from traffic going into and around the Norfolk Airport and drone data from around the airport. And we're demonstrating a model of how we could improve the safety around that airport markedly with the system. What we would love to do is actually do those type of operations. So we'd love to have those conversations.
Nancy Gurdon asks the question, is DroneUp planning to commercialize or market your technology platform even without a policy framework?
Yes, in fact, we are working with OEMs for implementing our technology onto their platforms as part of the manufacturing and deployment process. We have a commercial operator now, a large commercial operator that's getting ready to deploy this countrywide in another country. I'm under NDA right now, so I can't go into specifics, but that announcement will be coming out in a press release in several weeks. So there is a commercial aspect to it. And I appreciate that question because this can be deployed on a state level. This can be deployed on a commercial operator level. The big reason you're hearing me push at the federal level now is at the end of the day, the FAA has nexus of all of the airspace. And if we can get this deployed or these frameworks implemented on a national scale at this particular time and place, then I think the long-term implications to safety and safe operations are off the charts. But yes, there is commercial applications. There's statewide. There's even some municipal applications for our technologies.
Another person on the webinar wants to know, curious if you have any concerns at the Norfolk Airport. I guess are there any issues that you've seen at that airport with drone safety?
I have not seen any concerns at that airport. I will say that, and I fly in and out of that airport a lot. There are only two airports in the United States that I will not fly into or out of at this time. But this concern is a concern for me at every airport. But there are certain lower risk airports where we just simply don't see the volume of operations within the vicinity or the range of the airport that makes them very safe. We feel today, and Norfolk is one of those that we're very safe with. And I'm not going to say
Jeremy,
that, I'm not going to say the two, but if somebody wants to email me or text me, I will certainly say it offline. But there are two airports that I will not use, and one of them is closer than you think.
oh, okay, that's good to know. Jeremy Wilkinson wants to know if can you speak on what has been considered for drones to be equipped with ADSB, which I'm not sure what what ADSB is. If you could tell us what ADSB is, and has there been any consideration for drones to be equipped with this?
It's a conversation that comes up. I don't know if my CTO, John Vernon, is on the call, but I know he's laughing right now if he is. Um, but so by law, ADSB out cannot be used on drones. And so it's currently law. It would require an executive order or a change. It comes up a lot. The concern has always been with all of these drones flying, creating ADSB noise, that it would create a distraction for the operators who are using ADSB. So that you know, ADSB is just a transmission signal that basically tells people your speed, your altitude, your direction, so that others around you can be aware of who's in the airspace. You know, the other issue with ADSB is similar to others is technically by law, every aircraft in the United States should have ADSB on it, every manned aircraft. And yet we know that a significant number don't. And so we can't even rely, and we use ADSB data. It's one of our sensor intakes that we use for managing and monitoring the airspace. But unless you're in the Mode C Veil, and Mode C Veil is just a 30 mile, I think it's 30-mile radius around Class B airports where you are required to operate in that airspace, you have to have ADSB. Norfolk is not, obviously is not in the Mode C Veil. So in this particular area, we can't even rely on ADSB data as being comprehensive. Putting it on drones assumes every drone is going to be cooperative and use ADSB for one. And then secondly, I am concerned about the volume of noise that it creates for commercial and private pilot operators. But there has been talk. I think the question was, has there been talk? Yes, but I don't think it's going to happen.
Let me if you, do two things to wrap things up here. Look at your crystal ball, so to speak, and if you can, what do you think a fully coordinated airspace would look like in the future? Can you kind of paint a picture or give us an idea of how things could change or would change?
I think it's a multi-phase operation, but I think phase one is this, and this is a great one to close with, is I believe that the future of air traffic control is AI. That's Tom speaking. That's what I believe. Um, but I know that it's a long road and maybe a bridge too far right now to tell people, would you be comfortable getting in an airplane, taking off, flying through the airspace and landing, knowing that all of the directions and altitude and everything you were given were provided by AI? Probably not today, right? I understand that. But in the low altitude airspace, we're using AI combined with basic algorithms to do that deconfliction and separation. So what I see is phase one is low altitude is completely managed by AI, four-dimensional pathing, with algorithms that are really being backed up by AI rather than driving the actual outcomes. That over time will change. And then I think once we prove the efficacy and efficiency of that, that same system will control aircraft and operations above 500 feet, which includes autonomous operations that are larger, like AAM and others. And then eventually, I think we'll see more of that integrated where you have a consolidated airspace management solution, an ATOM, we call it, an air traffic and operations management system, that will be largely controlled, and all, both crewed and uncrewed aircraft will be deconflicted and managed in the airspace with a common vertically integrated system. That's my crystal ball future.
All right, so leave us with one last thought. 30 seconds. What would you, if you had 30 seconds with a policymaker, or lawmaker, or whatever, what would your message be to them?
Right
30
this moment, right this
Yeah,
moment, that the
yeah.
Air Traffic Control Modernization Bill and funding package must include a requirement for low altitude air traffic control systems testing, implementation, and integration. That's my ask.
Good, great. Tom, this has been fascinating. Thank you so very much. Just real quick, let me just finish up with a couple other things as we or what's coming up next. Just a reminder, if you ever want to see what our major focuses are, go to our website. They're all there available, as well as a lot of other information. Remember that later this afternoon, the recording for this particular webinar will be available on our website at RVA757Connects.com. And also, you can go back and look at any of our webinars, even the one back 3 years ago. Tom, if you want to go back and look at what you said 3 years ago, yours is on our website as well. Let me tell you, we have another exciting program coming up a month from now on June the 4th. This is Reinventing Pharma. The Richmond and Petersburg area is fast becoming a national leader in reshoring pharmaceutical manufacturing and securing the U.S. supply of essential medicines. through a powerful coalition of different public and private partners, including organizations like FLOG, Civica, Alliance for Building Better Medicines. The region is redefining what modern, resilient farm ecosystem can look like. This particular webinar, we have a good list of 4 speakers. Robbie Demaria, who was the founding chair of the Alliance for Building Better Medicines, which is a regional partnership. Eric Edwards, who is the CEO of Flow Corporation, which is that Richmond-based company that develops and domestically manufactures active pharmaceutical ingredients. Ned McCoy, who is the CEO of Civica. That's the nonprofit pharmaceutical company, which is operating that big, huge, state-of-the-art pharmaceutical manufacturing facility in Petersburg. And Joy Polifrone, who is the Regional Innovation Officer for the Advanced Pharmaceutical Manufacturing Technology and Innovation Hub. Again, that'll be Wednesday, June 4th. We'll start posting availability on our website probably in about a week or so. Hopefully you can join us. Also, Tom, let me thank you again for taking the time today. Your presentation was spot on, very interesting, fascinating, scary also to some degree too. But thank you very much for taking the time, and thank you for your service to our board here at RVA757 Connects.
Thanks for having me.
And also, let's thank the PRA group and Giovanna Gennard for sponsorship of today's webinar. And again, thank you all for joining us. We hope to see you a month from now on Wednesday, June the 4th. Have a great afternoon. Thank you so much.